All right. Well, Billy, it was fun to revisit that. I haven't listened to the whole thing through in a while.
I think same here. Same here.
It's not fun to sit and watch and listen to a recording of yourself for 25 minutes. So thank you for doing
Yes.
that. But first off, open-ended question for you. I mean, are there any other reflections or stories that come to mind, Billy, revisiting what you talked about there?
I started with standards are not monuments, right? I have my personal standards and my personal experiences. I'm working with a client now where the evolution of learning around your standards and what may have been great for you here may not work somewhere else. And so when you get so caught up in making standards monuments, I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure as well. But until you find something better or earn the right to do something better, do not waver. I mean, that's the most consistent lesson I've learned. Hold true to the standard until you earn the right to get something better.
When you
And
talk about,
most companies fail. I don't mean to stop you.
that's
It's
right.
not because they have bad leaders. They have bad standards, and the leader, in most cases, don't want to hold people to the standard. And I'd rather be respected than liked.
Mm. And there are connections there to what Toyota talks about, the phrase respect for people or respect for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
From your experience, if you can elaborate a little bit on, sometimes even if a leader is being a servant leader, that doesn't mean people get to do whatever they want to do. This comes back to standards. But
Mm-hmm.
can you elaborate on this idea of respect and holding people to the standard?
Okay, let me start with respect is a two-way street. It's not a one-way lane. Whereas I should show respect to everyone and they don't have to show respect back. And so very clear to start there, respect for people, that's a two-way street. And most people will respect you if you're consistent with the standard. Where the disrespect happens is when you start wavering and your standards are flavor of the month, flavor of the day. And so to garnish that respect, it starts with one consistency, but it's a two-way street. And that's how you build a culture around it. Two of my favorite leaders, and I'm a sports fan, but I admire Nick Saban, head coach of the University of Alabama football team, and Bill Belichick. I'm not too fond of their teams per se, but I am very, very impressed by the way they adhere to the standard. Now, I don't mean to offend anyone, but I'm just keeping it. I'm going to keep it real in this discussion. They can take a person from a poverty-stricken neighborhood and a kid from a private school and put them within that system where the standard is the standard, and they consistently meet or exceed expectations. And you know what? It's not the championships that they're going to admire Nick Saban, the head coach, for. The players that come back, they don't talk about the trophies or the rings. They talk about the person that Nick Saban helped them become based on growing up in that culture.
Right.
And so that's when you're saying respect for people. Listen, Billy Taylor, when he was in operations, especially at the end of my career, I wasn't working on my resume anymore. I was working on my obituary.
Mm.
See, here's what they're going to say when I'm not around anymore. And when I post something on social media, they don't say we broke the tire record. They say, when Billy was here, I could go in and speak to him. Or Sammy the janitor still texts me every holiday.
Mm-hmm.
That's around the respect around consistency, constancy of purpose, and constancy of process.
And I think you mentioned the janitor, and I think of respect for people. To me, means we treat everybody in the organization with respect. That we recognize, regardless of educational attainment, that people can be creative, that people can participate in improvement. Can you think back to times as a leader where you saw that being violated, or where you had to coach people up to saying, look, the standard is such and such about how we treat people within the organization, regardless of, setting aside the numbers and thinking about standards and process and behavior?
Mhm. Well, I'll talk about decisions I had to make, first of all, starting there on who was going to be on the team,
Mm,
right? At some point, I didn't hire just on skill set and what was on your resume, right? I wanted to look at how you treated people.
mhm.
One, how did you respect yourself? Let's start with the respect for yourself. And then the second part of is now, how do you treat people? Because I'll tell you, companies will forsake you. An article is going to come out from a person who used to be on my team that works for another company. He recently wrote a letter. His name is Jimmy Giles, and he worked for, I think, Whataburger, and he left. And he wanted to tell a chicken noodle soup story. I would tell my team, the company may buy you chicken noodle soup, but who's going to feed it to you?
Mm.
And so it started with that level of respect at home, as well as as well as at work. But for me, what I would look at is, what do you bring holistically to the table on how you treat people? How do you embrace the people that are on your team? Because if you can't let go without letting loose, then you're going to hold on to everything, and your team's going to fail.
Mhm.
They're going to fail. Again, I don't want to keep going back to sports analogies, but it's like recruiting and building a team in sports. On paper, this person looks like this Greek god, 6'7" and could run blazing speed at 4.2 seconds. The question is, can that person play?
Mhm.
That's the first question I want to answer. Can you play?
And
And if you
that
can't
means,
play,
yeah.
all that other stuff is no good. You went to Harvard, you went to Yale. I want that. That got you at the table. But can you play? And can you play means, can you respect people?
Mhm.
Can you treat people with dignity? And when I would deal with people, I think about men, women, children. Would I treat my brother that way? Would I treat my mother that way? Would I treat my sister, my daughter that way? Leaders should ask themselves that question when they're having those kind of tough conversations.
Yeah.
Now, I praised in public, I reprimanded in private.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do no dog and pony, but I will tell you, there was very few times that I compromised on that standard. When you sit across from me, you knew where you stood.
Yeah. And having that standard, the point to makes that, it's not arbitrary. It's not Billy was in a bad mood, so he's taking it on me. There's a clear reason, and you can point to that, to that disrespecting of the standard.
Absolutely.
When you talk about, can a player play? I mean, there's a difference between the measured speed and being able to run in a straight line and stop quickly and jump high if you can't work within a team. Like I think of, you think of an environment. We see this sometimes in a game. You've got this highly touted recruit who's had nothing but success. And then the first time they start facing challenges, you would hate to see, let's say, the quarterback turn on the teammates and yell at a lineman for missing a block or yell at a wide receiver for dropping a pass.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those key performance actions, as you
Yes.
put it, are important if we're going to hit key performance indicators.
Absolutely. And when I'd build a team, and I still do it today, I would get this nice resume, and I'd probably read that resume for maybe 10 minutes. And then the interview, I would push it to the side. And I would engage in a real cultural discussion. And I had some scripted questions, and it would sort out the mindset of the person. It would sort out of what were the things that were important to that person. What were the drivers in their leadership style?
Mhm.
Because if you can't explain it, then you don't understand it, or you're making it up.
Yep.
And I want to hear from you some examples. And often when I interview people, I'll ask, give me your top 3 strengths. And I said, but if you give me a strength, prove it. Don't just tell me, prove it. Show me a newsletter, show me something that would validate what you just said. And adults, they get stumped. They freeze up. They want to tell me I work hard. I come to work every day. I'm dedicated. Those things that you can just throw against the wall. I want to hear how you turn the team. I want to talk about what was your greatest lesson, kind of like your favorite mistake, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah.
Walk me through the things you did, because if a person can walk me through that, that's the mark of a good leader. Can they be agile? That's important. How do you manage conflict? Nothing's perfect. I would always say, look, do you live with someone? Are you married? If it's perfect, teach me. Right? Because I laugh. Sometimes I get two options at home being married. I can be happy or I can be right. I can't be both. So I've been happy a long time.
There's a good leadership lesson there, not always having to be right, regardless of personal or professional contexts.
Right. And you got to pick your battles. You can't, when I say standards, and even happy or right, I have those conversations around the standard. I don't violate the standards.
Yeah. Billy, we've got a question coming in here from my friend Chris Burnham. He asks, can you talk about establishing a standard where there might not be a standard yet?
Mm-hmm.
And
I think you start first of all with the why. What's the case for change, right? What's that purpose on why do you even need a standard? And from that, you talk about what's the variance. Why is it everything's sporadic? Why do you need that? And what are you trying to control? And from that, now you gain consensus. Play catch ball with the key stakeholders. Get the feedback from everyone. I think you'll land on a spot where this is what the standards needs to be. And then after you create the standard, don't just throw it out there and hope it sticks. Move to a KPA mindset. Now I have the standards. If we do these things, which are the standard, we will get this one thing that we need or we require.
So let's see. So one other thing I was going to ask you to elaborate on, Billy, in the episode, you talked about asking employees, what do you need from me? Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on servant leadership a little bit more broadly and what that means to you?
Right. And so in the video, I talk about me working for the team not working for me. Let me start there. Now, what I also mean, you have to be very clear of what need is, right? Just think about me. I want a Bentley car. I need a ride to work. They're different. Okay. And people will kind of gravitate to the want versus the need. Now, if I've given you or we've enabled you with everything you need to be successful, then the next part of that is you're accepting something. So you've got everything you need. The next question is, why do you accept that? Why do you accept people not following the standards? Because you have everything you need. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes is it capability or is it desire? You've got to sort that out. See, I can improve some capabilities, but desire, that person doesn't want to be there. And that's kind of like fit. And it's better to, if you can't convert those leaders, it's better to cut them early than to cut them late.
Yeah.
And what I mean, I don't mean to be harsh, but I need to be real with you. Okay. When I had to make some of those tough decisions, it wasn't a whole team. It was one or two individuals that were influencing the team. And so I had to make those tough calls, and I had to do that. And I would say probably 3 or 4 occasions on the new team for alignment, because if I didn't, that person would torpedo the whole team's efforts because it was always centered on them. So I had to make those decisions to, get some of those bad people off the team.
Yeah.
And I did, fact-based, right? It wasn't opinion-based. And I didn't want a lot of people like me around me. That was another core principle for mine. I understood where I was weak or I wasn't as strong, so I built a team around me that would complement me, right? And I would say, you know, it sounds funny until you get to the punchline. It says, yeah, I'm very smart, right? I've got 13 degrees. I'm very smart. And people say, 13 degrees? And yes, I was smart enough to earn 2, right? And I hired 11. And I use all 13.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what I don't know, but I know what I need. And so I don't have time to write the communications letter. I don't have time to write the safety protocol. I don't have time to, but if I build a team around me that complement me, we build a standard of an operating system where we manage the intersections. And it's very clear, if you can see behind me, those are intersections. Those little pictures behind me. I know they're hard to see, and this is just where I'm at the time, but those are intersections. Right? And if you look at the top, the bigger square, that's how you're doing month to date. To the right, it's year to date. But if you look below those 3 signs, it's like all 3 of those added up equals the big square up top.
Right.
So what that tells you is who owns what. And if you see the picture, that's the owner at the intersection. I want ownership. Right? Ownership trumps accountability. Right? And when people know what they own, they'll give you their very best to the standard. If you ever rented a car, when you rent that car, you're going to take care of it. But do you treat that car like you do the one you have at home that you own? No.
No. I heard somebody say once, this is probably true, nobody ever washes a rental car before they return it.
That's right.
Why
That's fact.
One other thing I was wondering if you could elaborate on, Billy. You talked about the idea of bringing your holistic self to work. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you? Like, what's the loss to individuals and the loss to an organization when people are not able to bring their whole authentic self to work?
Right. They're checking their brain. People tend to check their skill set, their brains, their innovative ideas. They keep them to themselves because, one, it's not safe, and they can't be their authentic self. People hold back. And I've really saw this throughout my career, really, and people from my personal experience. I'm not saying this is the case in every other organization. People from India would come to me, and they were bright, but the culture would kind of alienate them. And so with our ERGs, and I would walk around as chief diversity officer, and I would see these clusters of people eating, and they were like-minded, and they didn't feel that they could be their authentic self. But then we created platforms where people can, like, it was part of my daily management system for employee resource groups, where it was required that you do one networking event a quarter. It was required that you do one learning and development event a quarter. It was required that you did one community outreach in that demographic. What that did was allow them a platform to come to work as their authentic self. And when you can't be your authentic self, then you go into a shell. Now, this is humbling, but it is true about me in my career. I moved from a plant-based operation where I was the plant leader to a corporate base. And I literally shut down my first stint in corporate America. I'd be in meetings, but I wouldn't say anything. It just didn't feel safe for me. Right? And you know, so I didn't bring my best self to work until I read the book, The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And when I read that book, it was life-changing for me. Miguel Ruiz is the 4 agreements. Agreement number 1, right? Be impeccable with your words. Agreement number 2, right? Don't assume anything. Agreement number 3, don't take it personal. But sometimes people are just who they are. And agreement number 4, always be at your best. And so at that point, I realized that Billy had a value proposition that I could bring to the table, and I became a greater asset for the company. But when people can't show up as their authentic self, or they are shut down, I mean, you don't have a culture of innovation. You don't have a culture of growth. All right. People just coming in to check a box and get their paycheck, go home.
Yeah. We need more than that for sure.
I want you to be who you are. I want you to be yourself. And that's kind of why catch ball and a lot of exercise is one of the best tools I've used, because some of your best and brightest tend to hold back sometimes because they're not outspoken, they're introverted. And if you don't have a method to create that safe space, then you're not going to get those best ideas.
One other question that comes to mind, you went, as you were saying, from plant leadership to corporate roles in operations, and then you were in a diversity and inclusion role. What did you learn during the time in that role that stands out most to you, Billy?
People want to feel valued over everything else. I don't care if you're the janitor or the CEO. People want to feel valued. And people, when they do not feel that their value or their value proposition, they quit companies, they quit leaders. And when you start the engagement process, center it on value to the customer, right? Value to the company. And just as important, value to every individual. I have the 2-foot rule. If I get within 2 feet of you, I say hello. I don't care if I know you or not, especially if I'm in a plant. I just say hello. That little gesture in itself, it makes people feel important. It feels that they're valued and they want to give you more. I'm working with a leader now, and I always say I give people their flowers when I can see them. And this leader, I'm working with him now. He's actually in the room in the building, and he showed up as a senior leader. He's present. What he's doing is he's setting the standard, right? That's what's unique. Those are lessons learned. And if you set the standard, everybody else thinks it's safe. It's okay to participate, to engage. When you don't have that, right? When you do something to me rather than with me, then I still have the shield up.
Yeah.
Right. And in some cases, you'll ask me, Billy, is this what we're going to do? We're going to put the system in place. Here's what I'm saying. Yes, we're going to put it in place. Sure. Well, we're going to put it in place. My mindset is, yeah, we're going to do it. Just let me know what to do. But it never happened. And people can't be their authentic self. But if I ask you, how should we do it? What do you think? That's why we do the purpose map. It's built by the team. So it's not Billy's purpose map. It's the team's purpose map.
Yeah.
And everybody we work with, they initially want to call it the LinkDex process. We're doing the LinkDex process. And I say, from this point forward, do not call it the LinkDex process. I want you to call it your name, your operating system.
Yeah.
The blank operating system. When that happens, it's authentically theirs and they embrace it.
There's ownership.
Right? When they don't embrace it, then I own it. And when I leave, and what's another thing that's interesting, mindset. Think just mindset. When I give a proposal to work with somebody, I don't give them a proposal to stay with them. In the statement of work, it's an exit strategy.
Yeah.
I want to be walking away in 6 months. That means if you follow the standard 350 degrees for 30 minutes, you'll have a strong foundation that'll catapult you. Yep. But it's based on ownership and value. They feel valued to graduate from stage to stage. And so my greatest lesson is make people feel valued. And here's one of my favorite quotes. If you make people visible, they will make you valuable.
Yeah. So
every time, if you make people visible, even at the hotel office, if you speak to those people at the front desk in the restaurant, just say hello.
Yeah.
Watch the care you get.
Yeah. One last sports analogy I'm going to bring up. Have you seen the show Ted Lasso?
No.
It's in a nutshell about an American football coach. So an American who coaches American football gets hired to come to England to coach a Premier League. Some will cringe at me saying soccer, but come to coach what they would call football. And one of the things that really stands out to me, been going back and watching it a second time. Ted is new to that club, and he meets the equipment manager, who's like the lowest level person in the entire locker room. And Ted asks him, "What's your name?" And he's taken aback. He said, "Well, my name's Nate." Like, you could tell, like, nobody ever asks his name. And you think, well, how sad or how powerful, or good on Ted. And then later that day or the next day, Coach Ted Lasso says, "Hey, Nate," and Nate says out loud, "You remembered my name." And it's so simple, but what you're saying reminds me of.
That's right.
Of that
It
scene.
is.
Yeah.
It's not simple. It's value, right? It's value. Taking that time to. Yes. No. Not. Those are standards, though. It goes back to standard. What's your standard? What's your standard?
And those key performance actions on how we treat.
Yes. Right. The key performance indicator is too late, right? The KPAs deliver the KPI. If I want to lose weight, standing on the scale is the KPI.
Mm-hmm.
But if I watch what I eat, and if I go to bed on time, and if I exercise, those are KPAs. We should spend just as much time focusing and measuring the KPAs as we do focusing on the KPI.
All right. Well, I think that's a great thought to leave things on. So we're at the top of the hour. So I think we'll wrap up. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching live, and for submitting comments and questions. I want to thank everyone if you're watching the recording. Thank you for doing so. I want to thank Billy. Thank you for taking time to sort of build upon that conversation in the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mark. And it was humbling to have a global audience from all over the world. I'm flattered. That's the value proposition. I have to be honest. As I say, I'm just a little quiet, shy guy from Texas. And so I thank y'all for supporting me. And there will be a book coming out later in the year that's talking about this, everything Mark and I talk about. And it basically is called the Linked X process. So how do you connect the intersection? So Mark, thank you for having me.
And I apologize. Part of my standard in my notes here, I was going to ask about the book, and I apologize for not doing that.
We've covered everything that's going to be in the book.
Okay, well, looking forward to that, and I'll post updates on LinkedIn as that book is becoming available. And please do check out Billy's website, www.linkedxl.com.
Yes.
All right, good to see you again as always, Billy. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody.